Hi, welcome to John's Jeep Garage. Just finished a project yesterday. This will be the introduction to the video. My daughter has the 1998 Jeep Wrangler TJ 4-liter, and steering had slack in it. So I had changed the power steering pump because of a leak a while back, but this is, she turned maybe 10 degrees, 10 degrees to the left or 10 degrees to the right, and the steering actually wouldn't catch up with it. So trying to troubleshoot it, I looked at the turning of the steering wheel and actually the steering shaft going down to the gearbox, and the steering wheel and the steering shaft turned exactly together. So there wasn't any type of loose fitting, coupler, or anything from that standpoint. But in the gearbox itself, they would actually turn both directions and the wheels would not move. So the only option I had was to replace the gearbox. This video shows us how to replace that gearbox. Hopefully this video helps you, gives you a little insight on how to replace it, and thank you for visiting John's Jeep Garage. So one of the things you need to do is you need to at least start off with trying to get the steering wheel centered before you start this work. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to take the cap off of the power steering pump, and then I am going to use this transfer pump just to drain this, because when I loosen the fittings on the gearbox in this process, it's going to drain. Even though I have a catch pan underneath, I'm just trying to minimize the impact. And don't forget your safety glasses. Okay, so I have a guard here I'm going to take off, but the guard actually is using the same bolts that hold up the gearbox itself. So I'm not going to remove that guard first until I remove the pitman arm. The first thing you want to do is remove the nut on the pitman arm, because next you're going to be removing the pitman arm with a pitman arm puller. Okay, the first step was to remove that nut and lock washer from the pitman arm, and now let's try to remove that pitman arm from the gearbox. One thing about this pitman arm puller from Harbor Freight is, yeah, you could put a socket over this as you adjust it, but it also, you can take a nice 3/8 inch drive, and it fits in, and then you can use your impact wrench without even needing the socket. As you can see, I fitted over the arm itself. I tightened this up just to start the process, and I will probably, right at the base of this spline, spray a little PB blaster in it, just so it has a little time to set, and then I'm going to put pressure and pull the pitman arm off. Now, this is where I'll hit it with the hammer and tap it if it's stuck. So I'm going to have to, apply pressure with the impact wrench and tap at the same time. But again, I'm just going to hit this with some PB blaster before I start. Okay, so I soaked this with some PB blaster. So I finally tried that impact socket, been banging on that thing. I use PB blaster. You can tell it's pretty rusted in there. But I got a cheater bar, and I am able to turn this thing more, so it looks like it's loosening up now. Okay. So I've been able to do it. I'm just going to remove it now and push the arm on the side. I got to take off the 3 mounting bolts to hold the gearbox on. And then this will be the last one right here. Notice I'm working through a guard that I have protecting mine. Okay, so I have a poison spider guard that I just moved off to the side. I removed the side bolts for the gearbox. I have it setting on a jack that I jacked up right underneath it, and I'll kind of lower it. I was going to use a chair, which I have as a little shop chair that moves up and down, but as I said, a friend of mine said try the jack, and I like the idea, so I'm going with it. So I lowered the jack, which lowered the gearbox, which gives me a better angle to go ahead and not only remove those two fittings, but remove that coupling that's on that steering shaft. I'm going to remove these fittings first, which will be a little bit easier access for me to get to that coupling bolt. And then I have the drain pan underneath. Let that drain what's left in there, and then get to that retaining bolt. So you can see I lowered it, removed the two fittings, but if you look at the steering shaft right there, there's that little coupling, and then there's that little 13 millimeter screw that you just got to remove, and then pry this thing off of there, and we should be good. This is probably an easier way to see it. The bolt was right here, and now I'm just gonna, there, how to just pry that loose, and then I'm gonna go ahead and remove the whole gearbox. Let's look at everything after it's been removed. So, okay, the pitman arm I got kind of sitting on the side next to the tie rod. You see the two hose fittings that I had to release, but let's look at the, this is where that retaining bolt went in. This is at the end of the steering shaft. And if you notice, there's a little flat spot here. So when the gearbox goes back in, you want to ensure the shaft goes in and the flat spots line up. And then we'll put the clip back in. These are the bolt holes where the gearbox was secure, but that's what the empty space looks like. It was just maneuvering and getting to it. And here you have the old gearbox. So this is a picture of the old and the new. Just want to make sure they're the same. Let's remove the cap. This one actually has a little bit of a pin on it sticking out. This one does not, but that goes into an empty space. So, and again, remember I told you about the flat surface lining it up when it goes in. And then on the, if you can tell, you see this deeper spline groove? There's 4 of them on here. Those are called master splines, and they fit in a certain way to line up with the master spline on the pitman arm. Okay, so I'm gonna put the new one in now. Just a couple points. You got these 2 caps that you just loosen for the high pressure and low pressure fittings. Hopefully you noted which went where when you were taking it apart. There, I'm going to angle the gearbox, keeping note that that flat edge of that top gear is going to go insert right there, and then I'm going to push it forward. I'm going to try with the bolt in there at first, see if I can insert the gear in. If not, I'll do it without. And on that bolt, I'm going to put a little bit of blue thread locker. All right, so I pushed it up in there, flat spot, but I took that bolt out, pushed it up, and then put the bolt back in. As you can see, I got to remove those 2 caps, or those seals on the refurbished gearbox. And I have it just sitting right there right now. I really wanted to lock that in, and then I'll remove the caps and then put the high pressure and low pressure fluid lines back on. So when putting these on, these O-rings at the bottom, when you purchase the refurbished gearbox, you're given 2 O-rings. Replace the O-rings, because the O-rings will, if you have the bad one on there, it can leak. And the O-ring helps create that seal. Okay, so we're still not there yet, but let's just kind of go through the steps. Once we attach the retaining bolt, we had to kind of push and get the whole gearbox back up into this section. If you have 2 people, one person can hold it. Even though I was by myself, I was spending a lot of time holding it, even though I had the jack to support it. I then put both high pressure, low pressure hoses back on, and then I had to maneuver it. And the first bolt that I put on was actually this front lower bolt. Lined it up, put some blue thread locker on it, and then pushed it up so I could at least get that in position. And then I put this one on next, and then the top one. Now remember, I have a guard that I'm also making work with this as well. For anyone who doesn't have this guard, all you have to do is just worry about the bolts themselves. But I didn't tighten them all the way, because then the next thing, and you really have to get right underneath it. But if you notice, there's these master splines. They're set like at 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And you just gotta push and maneuver. You have, that whole arm to where it just fits, and you align it and you push it in. And the next thing I'm gonna do is put the lock washer and bolt back on, and then I'm gonna torque it to specifications. Okay? So as you tighten the pitman arm nut, I got a big torque wrench. It's gonna be 185 foot-pounds is where you wanna stop. The frame bolts here, Extreme Terrain has it at 78 foot-pounds. So that's, I have a smaller wrench. I torque those once I tighten those out as well. I'm using my large one for the pitman arm bolt too, nut, 185 foot-pounds. Okay, once you've gotten everything torqued and tightened up, you got to go put the power steering fluid back in. But remember, you're going to have to do it a couple times. So drive it, keep turning it, and keep checking it, and then you'll be good to go. Thank you. Make sure you test drive your Jeep. Initially, it's going to be a little sluggish until you work the fluid through the system and then refill it. Okay, that's it. But this is your steering you're talking about, so please make sure everything's tightened up. Please make sure you're checking for leaks. Please make sure that the fluid, that once you put it in and you've turned it all the way to the left and all the way to the right, and you've drove it, that you've gone back and you've checked the fluid level and had what you need. Make sure it's OEM spec power steering fluid, most are nowadays. Torque specs, I got them from extremeterrain.com. It's always been very helpful for me looking up different year Jeeps. So remember, 185 foot-pounds on the pitman arm nut, and also on the side bolts. They're at 78 foot-pounds. Again, I mentioned this, but check for leaks and keep an eye on it for the first aspect of your driving. All right. Thank you again. Hope this helped. If it did, please like, and we'd love for you to subscribe. Thank you.